On Sunday, December 17th, a woman came running into the Video Hut rental store. She was barefoot, her hands and face streaked with red. Her name was Michelle Thayer. In a distressed state, she begged the staff to call for help. Her husband, she said, had been shot. Michelle had no cell phone on her that evening, so the rental store became her only option. Within minutes, emergency responders were dispatched, and Fayetteville police moved quickly to the location she described. The scene was unsettling. In the nearby parking lot stood a single vehicle, a red Ford Explorer. Next to it lay a man, gravely wounded. It was 31-year-old Marty Thayer. He was a soldier, newly assigned to a military base in the area. He and Michelle had only recently settled into Fayetteville to start this chapter of their lives. That day, they had attended a Christmas party together. Afterwards, Michelle needed to swing by her office to collect some items, so Marty waited outside in the car. What happened next unfolded in seconds. Michelle said she heard the sharp crack of 5 gunshots. She rushed out of the building and found her husband collapsed beside their vehicle. With no time to think, she sprinted for help. Paramedics worked urgently at the scene, but Marty's wounds were devastating. Despite every attempt to save him, he died shortly afterwards. What puzzled investigators immediately was the absence of a clear motive. Nothing had been stolen from the car. There were no signs of robbery, no witnesses who had spotted a gunman, and no unusual activity reported around the lot. Michelle's hands were tested for gunpowder residue, an immediate step to rule out suspicions, but the results showed nothing. For detectives, the question lingered. What had happened to Marty, and why? If you're a fan of true crime and criminal investigations, you won't want to miss our new book, The Ultimate Book of Serial Killers: 180 Files of the World's Most Notorious Murderers, now available on Amazon. You can also purchase the PDF version directly from our website for instant download. You'll find the link in the video description and in a pinned comment. Now, let's dive into today's case. Captain Frank Martin, Marty Thayer, entered the world on February 26, 1969, in Würzburg, Germany. Though he was born on European soil, Marty was not German. His father was stationed there with the U.S. military, and his mother, Linda, worked as a nurse. Marty was their only child, and from the very beginning he was deeply cherished, especially by his mother, who saw him as the center of her life. But family life was complicated. His father, also named Martin, carried struggles that few around him understood. At times, he was harsh and quick to anger. At others, he withdrew into silence. The tension between Marty's parents grew heavier with time. One day, when Marty was still young, his father walked out and never returned. Linda was left alone, raising her son in a foreign country, carrying the grief of abandonment while trying to provide stability. Later, she would learn that her husband had suffered from schizophrenia, a fact that explained much but brought little comfort. Seeking support, Linda returned to the United States with Marty and moved in with her parents in Colorado. She worked hard to provide for her son, and her parents stepped in to help. Marty's grandfather, a veteran who had fought on the front lines in the 1940s, became a steady and loving presence. He filled the role of a father figure, teaching Marty lessons about resilience, discipline, and kindness. Their bond was strong, and it shaped Marty's view of the world. At school, he thrived academically, excelled in sports, and earned the respect of his peers. Friends were plentiful, but no relationship meant more to him than the one he shared with his mother, Linda. She was his anchor, his closest confidant. It was during his teenage years in Colorado that Marty met Michelle, the girl who would change the course of his life. Michelle was born on December 9, 1970. Like Marty, her family life was unsettled. Her father, Tom, was also in the military, which meant frequent relocations. For 3 years, the family lived in the United Kingdom, and later he was sent to South Korea. Michelle, the oldest of 3 children, carried much of the responsibility in her household. She adored her father and struggled with the pain of his absence after he divorced her mother. Michelle cared for her younger sister, Angela, and her brother Tom while their mother worked. Despite her heavy responsibilities, Michelle still managed to do well at school, though she preferred a small circle of friends over the spotlight. When Michelle and Marty met, their bond was immediate. Marty, who had grown up without siblings, enjoyed spending time with Michelle's brother and sister, quickly becoming part of her family. By the late 1980s, Marty had graduated high school and secured a place at the U.S. Air Force Academy. Though he dreamed of space travel, the reality was harsh. Becoming an astronaut required rare opportunities and fierce competition. Marty chose instead to dedicate himself to the military, a path that still aligned with his passions. Michelle, meanwhile, joined the military reserves after high school while enrolling at university. She helped pay for her studies with her reserve service and even completed a 5-month deployment, earning a Medal of Merit for her dedication. Still, the military was not her long-term ambition. During her service, she discovered her true interest lay in psychology. Even with demanding schedules, their relationship endured. Eventually, Marty proposed, and in 1991, the couple married. Michelle at 21, Marty at 22. Marty's first assignment was in Oklahoma. Michelle balanced her time between studying psychology and working part-time in a nursery. But before long, he was transferred again, this time to Denver for training. Once again, Michelle packed up her life to follow him. The move was disruptive, but she stayed determined, continuing her studies in Colorado. Her persistence paid off. In 1994, Michelle graduated with a bachelor's degree in psychology, becoming the first in her family to earn a university degree. For Marty and Michelle, it seemed like the future was unfolding exactly as it should. Two ambitious young people building a life together, anchored by love and resilience. Determined to go further, Michelle continued her studies without pause, enrolling in a master's program right after finishing her degree. By the mid-1990s, life carried the couple to Florida, where new opportunities awaited them both. Michelle quickly completed her master's degree in psychology and moved on to pursue a PhD. She poured herself into research and began contributing articles to academic publications. Her vision for the future was clear. She wanted to build a career in academia and ultimately become a therapist. While she chased this path, Marty pressed forward in his own military career, each of them climbing their respective ladders of success. In Florida, Michelle found work that gave her meaning. She volunteered on a crisis line, offering support to victims of abuse. Later, she moved into more hands-on therapeutic work, even holding sessions with inmates in correctional facilities. Invited as a guest expert, she appeared on local radio programs and spoke at public events, building a reputation as a compassionate, thoughtful professional. At home, life seemed steady. Michelle and Marty purchased a modest house with a swimming pool, a symbol of the comfortable life they were creating. But behind that image, cracks were slowly forming. The rhythm of military life was demanding, and both their careers required long hours. In 1996, Marty was deployed to Kuwait for several months. It was the first time Michelle had experienced such a long separation from him, and it left her anxious and unsettled. By the end of the decade, more challenges tested their bond. Marty's military orders sent him to Georgia, while Michelle secured a coveted internship in Alabama. For several months they lived apart, each focused on building their own future. The year 1999 proved especially tough. Separate households brought with them a sense of independence, something Michelle began to value. Without the constant pressure of shared responsibilities, she discovered she enjoyed the freedom of making her own choices, managing her own schedule, and not having to worry about the daily routines of married life. Eventually, Marty's next transfer came through. This time, he was reassigned to North Carolina. Michelle, having finished her internship, agreed to join him. They moved to Fayetteville, a city defined by its military connections and steady flow of new arrivals. Here, Michelle began working as a licensed psychologist in private practice. She adapted quickly to her new role and found a measure of stability in her career. Marty, always proud of her achievements, stood by her side, but their marriage was no longer the same. Years of separation had changed their dynamic. Now living under the same roof again, small differences began to feel larger. Marty's meticulous nature clashed with Michelle's independence, and arguments over trivial things, like cleanliness, became frequent. But beneath those surface disagreements lay deeper issues. At 30, Marty longed to start a family. He wanted children, believing it was the right time. Michelle, however, disagreed. She was just beginning to establish herself professionally, and the thought of raising children while moving from base to base filled her with dread. By the middle of 2000, Michelle suggested they try marriage counseling. Marty refused. With no compromise in sight, she made a decision. She would move out, at least temporarily. Michelle rented an apartment for 3 months while Marty stayed in their house. She wasn't certain she wanted a divorce, but she believed distance might help her sort through her feelings. Before long, however, it became clear that Michelle was not living alone. She had begun an affair. John Diamond was 28 years old, an Army staff sergeant based at Fort Bragg, only a short drive from where the Thiers lived. His path crossed with Michelle's about a year earlier, not by chance, but through the internet. From the start, it was clear Michelle's intentions went beyond casual conversation. She had posted an ad saying she wanted a physically fit, attractive partner between the ages of 25 and 35, someone she could meet with 2 or 3 times a week. But looks alone weren't enough. She wanted a man who could challenge her intellectually as well. She was also clear that she wasn't interested in long-distance flings. Her ideal partner had to be from the Fayetteville area. John Diamond fit the description perfectly. Like Michelle, he came from a military background. He was tall, athletic, and carried himself with the confidence of a career soldier. He was also married. His wife was a woman he had met while stationed in Panama, and she had followed him to the United States. But John's loyalty was questionable. He had a reputation for infidelity. Michelle and John grew close quickly. They shared not only physical attraction, but also an interest in swinging and alternative lifestyles. Yet, despite this connection, Michelle hadn't completely turned her back on her husband. After several months of separation, Marty reached out. He admitted his mistakes and this time agreed to attend marriage counseling, something he had refused before. For Michelle, this was a sign that their relationship might still be saved. She returned home after 3 months apart, ready to give her marriage another chance. In therapy, they confronted the issues that had been pulling them apart: Marty's obsession with order and routine, Michelle's frustration with the constant relocations that military life demanded, her desire for a more social, outgoing lifestyle versus his preference for the quiet of home. And then there was the question of children, something Marty wanted, but Michelle was not ready for. Their sessions were intense, but one topic never came up: Michelle's affair with John Diamond. Marty seemed to be completely in the dark. Instead, it was Michelle who raised the subject of betrayal. Years earlier, when the couple had been living in Florida, Marty had posted an online ad of his own. Nothing had come of it, and Marty expressed deep regret, insisting no affair had ever taken place. Still, Michelle treated the discovery as if it had been an act of disloyalty, and it weighed heavily on their marriage. Meanwhile, John Diamond had difficulty letting go of his time with Michelle. The end of their relationship was painful for him, but eventually, he appeared to accept it, or at least, that's how it seemed. On December 17th, 2000, everything came to a head. That evening, Marty and Michelle attended a Christmas party hosted by Michelle's employer. Friends and colleagues remembered seeing them together, holding hands, smiling, and appearing close, like any loving couple. No one suspected that within hours tragedy would strike. After the party, the couple headed home. But before returning for the night, Michelle asked Marty to make a quick stop at her office. She said she needed to collect some books. Marty waited in their red Ford Explorer while she went inside. Moments later, gunfire shattered the night. At around 10:30 p.m., Marty was shot 5 times in the parking lot, one bullet striking his head in what looked like a deliberate attempt to ensure he wouldn't survive. When investigators arrived, they immediately noticed the strangeness of the crime. Nothing had been stolen. Marty's wallet, his watch, everything remained untouched. It didn't look like a robbery at all. It looked personal. As often happens, suspicion turned toward the victim's spouse. Detectives learned that Marty had recently taken out a life insurance policy worth $500,000, and Michelle's behavior that night raised questions. Rather than using the phone in her office to call for help, she ran barefoot across the street to a nearby video rental store. To police, this seemed odd. Did she waste precious time when her husband lay dying? Michelle gave her explanation. She said that when she heard the gunshots, she ran outside in panic. In her rush, she had locked herself out of her office, leaving her without access to a phone. With no other choice, she ran to the video hut and begged the staff to call 911. But investigators weren't convinced. To them, Michelle's story left room for doubt. She admitted to her affair with John Diamond, described the crisis in her marriage, and revealed details about her strained relationship with Marty. She even confessed that, although she had supposedly ended things with John, she still maintained contact with him as a friend. This honesty caught investigators' attention, but it also raised a new possibility. Perhaps John Diamond himself had a motive. Did he want Marty out of the way to have Michelle for himself? John Diamond was quickly brought in for questioning. He denied any involvement. On the night of the murder, he said, he had been at home with his wife, watching movies. His wife supported his story, and her mother, who had also been present, confirmed it. For a moment, it seemed like John's alibi was secure. But the very next day, on December 18th, John filed for divorce, a coincidence investigators found too curious to ignore. Suspicious, detectives re-interviewed his wife. This time, shaken by the divorce and aware of her husband's infidelities, she decided to tell the full story. She recalled that around 9 p.m., While they were supposedly watching a film together, John received a phone call. He immediately stood up, changed his clothes, and announced he was going to the barracks. Phone records later confirmed that the call had come from Michelle's number. Michelle, however, denied ever making the call. The case was building, but it still relied heavily on circumstantial evidence. In 2001, both Michelle and John were asked to take polygraph tests. They refused. To detectives, the refusal looked suspicious, though both claimed their lawyers had strongly advised against it. As the questioning deepened, new revelations surfaced. Investigators discovered that Michelle's affair with John had not been her first. During Marty's deployments and training, particularly when she lived in Alabama, Michelle had sought out excitement through multiple affairs and by frequenting clubs where partners were exchanged. Marty, who longed for a stable family life, appeared completely unaware. What's more, Michelle had not truly ended her involvement with John after returning to Marty. She told investigators that she had, but emails painted a different picture. Initially, she had tried to cut ties, but John begged her not to leave him. Their relationship continued. Surveillance set up outside Michelle's home confirmed their ongoing affair. At the start of 2001, Michelle and John even vacationed together in Florida, showing little sign of grief or mourning. To detectives, the picture was clear. Michelle may not have pulled the trigger, but she could have manipulated her lover to do it for her. Their suspicions were reinforced when John's acquaintances revealed that he had borrowed a pistol from a man named John Donald. The weapon was the same type used in Marty's murder. When police asked Diamond to return the gun, he claimed it had been stolen during a car break-in. But surveillance footage suggested otherwise. His car had been seen outside Michelle's residence on the night of the alleged theft, making it appear that the break-in story was staged. Amid mounting pressure, Michelle returned to the police station with a strange explanation. She admitted she had continued seeing John after Marty's death, but insisted it was only because she was conducting her own investigation. She claimed her background in psychology gave her tools to extract information, and she wanted to determine whether John had been the one to kill her husband. To detectives, it was another curious twist in a story that was becoming increasingly tangled. In February 2001, military police arrested John Diamond. He was formally charged with murder and conspiracy to commit murder. His trial began in August of that year. The prosecution's case leaned heavily on circumstantial evidence, but the pieces fit together in ways that were hard to ignore. Investigators established that John had borrowed the pistol used to kill Marty. Phone records showed repeated communication between him and Michelle in the days and hours before the murder, suggesting planning and coordination. Witnesses, his wife and acquaintances, described his abrupt behavior the night of the killing, leaving home after receiving a phone call. And most damning of all, ballistics proved that the bullets recovered from Marty's body had been fired from the very weapon John had borrowed. Still, the case had gaps. No one had seen John at the scene of the shooting. No fingerprints, no DNA, no eyewitness testimony tied him directly to the act itself. When called to testify, Michelle invoked her Fifth Amendment rights and refused to answer questions, a decision that further fueled suspicions but left prosecutors with fewer direct statements to use against her. John, for his part, denied pulling the trigger. He claimed he wasn't the mastermind, instead portraying himself as a man drawn into Michelle's schemes. The military court was not persuaded. John Diamond was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without parole. In accordance with military law, he was stripped of his rank, honors, and benefits. The defense attempted to challenge the verdict, raising questions about a possible conflict of interest. They alleged that Michelle had paid the initial retainer for his civilian attorneys, a fact not disclosed at trial. Yet despite these efforts, the conviction stood. No plea deal was ever offered, and John Diamond began his life sentence. With Diamond behind bars, attention turned squarely back to Michelle. In August 2001, she was charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Instead of facing trial, she vanished. She withdrew $30,000 from her savings, underwent plastic surgery to alter her appearance, adopted a false identity, and fled to Florida. For over a year, she managed to stay hidden, keeping a low profile, avoiding familiar places and anyone who might recognize her. Her run ended in August 2002 when authorities finally tracked her down. By then, investigators had compiled a vast trove of evidence. Over 88,000 emails and instant messages from Michelle's computer revealed not only her romantic involvement with John Diamond, but also their discussions about Marty's death. Among the discoveries were internet searches for body bags and detailed notes on how to assume a new identity, obtain false documents, and evade capture. When Michelle's trial began in 2004, she too refused to testify, again citing her Fifth Amendment rights. But the digital evidence spoke for her. Jurors saw the explicit communications with John, the records of her planning, and the careful steps she took to disappear after charges were filed. It was enough to secure a conviction. In December 2004, Michelle was found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. She was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. She remains incarcerated at the Anson Correctional Institution for Women in Polkton, North Carolina. Even in prison, Michelle's behavior raised alarms. In 2010, she was disciplined after guards intercepted a hand-drawn map of the facility that she had attempted to mail out, possibly signaling an escape attempt. She spent 45 days in disciplinary segregation as punishment. Captain Marty's story stands as a reminder of how fragile life can be. To those who knew him, family, friends, and colleagues, he is remembered not for the tragedy of his death, but for the dedication, loyalty, and love he showed throughout his life. His memory continues to be honored, even as the case that ended his life remains one of Fayetteville's most haunting examples of love gone fatally wrong. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.